Welcome to the 3 Down Nation podcast, powered by Jiffy Lube. He's Justin Dunk and I'm John Hodge. Today, we're discussing the CFL banning unvaccinated players from the playoffs.
Dookie Duke Williams making his Riders debut.
Andrew Harris's knee injury.
The departure of Rod Black from TSN.
And Chuba Hubbard scoring his first NFL touchdown. But first, Dunkster, the Edmonton Elks traded franchise quarterback Trevor Harris to the Montreal Alouettes in exchange for defensive end Antonio Simmons. Does this trade make sense for both teams?
It makes sense for the Montreal Alouettes, not for the Edmonton Elks, Haji, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that if you're not reading 3 Down Nation on a consistent basis and you're listening to the podcast, you got to get on there because we had the report that Trevor Harris was on the trade block and that the only team that we listed in that report, Hodge, that they had dialogue with was the Alouettes. So that's where Harris goes. We had a sense this was going to go down this way, even as mind-boggling as it is. And back to your original question, I just don't understand, or it's hard for me to even comprehend how Edmonton could go from anointing Trevor Harris as the franchise quarterback, not even when they signed him a couple of years ago, but in 2021, bringing in this veteran core around him, playmakers like Darrell Walker obviously added back into the mix, and he had his buddy Greg Ellingson there, a lot of other guys around him, including James Wilder Jr., who's leading the league right now in yards from scrimmage, and they're going to point the finger at Harris as being the issue. I mean, as much as there were some questions about, I will say, fairly or unfairly, his toughness in Ottawa, and the Redblacks maybe didn't feel like he could be that guy to lead the franchise to a Grey Cup after Henry Burris did. That said, you've never heard anything where Harris has been a divisive figure within the locker room. So I can't understand or comprehend the decision that has happened now, especially because Brock Sunderland and Jamie Elizondo had championed Harris and their relationships together from being in the nation's capital as a plus for this team in 2021. They're 2-7. That is not at all supposed to go on the shoulders of Trevor Harris in my mind.
Yeah, and I think the vaccination status of Harris played into this. He spoke to the media after arriving in Montreal. He confirmed that he was just recently vaccinated against COVID-19 during the previous week. And so I think that was, potentially a stressor in Edmonton, realizing, okay, if the travel restrictions come into effect, and it seems like they're not going to come into effect now until the end of November, but if you're Edmonton 6, 7, 8 weeks ago going, okay, it's possible we got to play our last 4 games, including this ridiculous 3 games in 7-day stretch we have due to the cancellation or postponement of a previous game. All of a sudden, we got to do without our starting quarterback. I think that played a factor. But you're right, Dunkster. The Elks are a mess from top to bottom. And Harris, no, he has not played brilliantly this season, but he's still a proven starting quarterback in this league. And if you look over the history of mid-season trades, last year, of course, Zach Collaros got sent from Toronto to Winnipeg. He got moved for a conditional first-round pick. We saw Drew Willie get shipped out mid-season. They're in the reverse order, Winnipeg to Toronto back in the 2016 season. He got moved for, a first-round pick plus players. So if that is the status quo, right, a first-round pick or a first-round pick plus other assets for a proven starter, I think Montreal made out like bandits here, giving up an American defensive end, good player, but one that they don't particularly need on that defensive line.
And if you look at Harris's stats in 2021, it's not like they're awful. 70% completion rate, 1,568 yards, 6 touchdowns, and yes, 5 picks, which is abnormal for Harris. Normally the TD to INT ratio is much more tilted towards the touchdowns. But in 6 games, what else do you want from the guy? And I would point the finger in terms of the issues in Edmonton, being with Elizondo and the culture that he's developed. There were a lot of questions about him coming in as a rookie head coach, and he seemed to bring his massively sized ego into the City of Champions, which seems like it's difficult to do because Connor McDavid takes up so much space there on his own. That said, that's the issue. He's calling out veteran players in training camp. Let's make this comparison so everybody remembers. Sean Lemon was cut goes down the road to Calgary, and is now a member of the Stampeders on a team that is looking hot at the right time, and he's among the league leaders in sacks. Kenny Stafford was apparently not a fit with the culture there. Well, I think he's probably happier now that he's in Ottawa catching touchdowns from a young Caleb Evans and helping out that offense. So what I'm getting at is these are some of the decisions that have been made, and mostly those are on the head coach. Brock Sunderland alluded to it kind of in a roundabout way. Harris more so went to the point of saying that it was really Elizondo's decision to start Taylor Cornelius over Harris after literally one part of a bad game in Winnipeg at IG Field, where the Bombers are undefeated against the best defense in the league without much help in terms of scheme. So to me, that's where the issues lie, is with the head coach, and I would say even the GM. His record has gotten worse there every year in Edmonton.
That's true, and we should move on, Dougster, but I will point out as well, as much as Harris, as you pointed out, his numbers have not been as good this year as they have been in the past. First of all, that's true for almost every quarterback in the CFL, right? Offense as a whole is down, and I think that's a byproduct of the issues that have taken place just simply since having a season off. The other thing I'll say is, unlike in Calgary, where Jake Mayer has actually put up better numbers than Bo Levi Mitchell, that's not the case in Edmonton. Taylor Cornelius' numbers are still worse than what Trevor Harris put up. So it makes that decision all the more head-scratching. And I'm not suggesting that Calgary should start Jake Mayer. All I'm saying is that's the decision that Edmonton made. Let's move the franchise guy and install the rookie. Well, they're not the team whose rookie has outperformed the vet at this point. So it's all the more head-scratching. And the situation in Edmonton didn't make a lot of sense before this trade. It seems to make even less sense now.
Agreed, buddy. According to a report from TSN reporter Dave Naylor, the CFL will not allow unvaccinated players to participate in the Grey Cup playoffs. Does this decision make sense to you, Mr. Hodge?
I think it does. I think the concern from the CFL, talking to sources, is that it's going to create a competitive imbalance if, let's say, out east, and this is a hypothetical, but just, as an example, let's say Hamilton travels to Toronto for the East Final. Well, if Hamilton is able to bus, given the very short distance, they can bring unvaccinated players. They don't have to fly. It creates a competitive imbalance, right, out west. If, let's say, the Calgary Stampeders travel to Winnipeg for the West Final, you can't hop on a bus in Calgary and get to Winnipeg an hour later. That is an overnight type of trip. It's not something that is reasonable, particularly given that the playoffs are pushed later this season, and you could have a situation where it's a snowstorm, right? I live out on the prairies. The weather here, sometimes it's decent in early December, but we've also had snowstorms at Thanksgiving. You never know what the weather will be like or when it could strike. So to me, this simplifies things. I appreciate them getting this information out now, so players who are currently unvaccinated and want to participate in the playoffs in 5-6 weeks' time have the opportunity to get vaccinated, and those who wish to remain unvaccinated, which is their right, can get out of the way.
At least it makes the playing field even. And I don't want to go into all the politics of this, and by and large for myself, I respect people's decision. So at least there's some lead time here where the players who are not yet vaccinated can decide whether or not they want to do so to be able to participate in the playoffs or not. That said, Randy Ambrosie has come out and said that he wishes he could mandate vaccinations for all of the players in the league. Can't do so because it's not included in the current collective bargaining agreement. You hear rumors around the league that it's something that the head office would like to have in the next CBA, but that's going to be difficult to get in there because the players are going to want to protect their side of it as well. So at least this has been out there, and it's really more of a mandate from the league than a discussion with the CFL Players Association, but it's par for the course. This is what the CFL does, by and large part, to the CFLPA in a number of ways. They mandate things, probably wasn't even communicated to the PA before this came out, and odds are they found out about it on social media. I hope that wasn't the case. I'm just saying that based on what has happened in the past here. And you can understand it, though, from the CFL's perspective, that they feel like for themselves it's the safest way to go about things. And here we are.
But this is not, and you mentioned the word political, and I appreciate there are some players on social media who are making it out like this is a political issue. Vaccines are not a political issue. Vaccines are a public health and safety issue. We've trusted our experts to develop a vaccine that works. And I'm not an epidemiologist. James Wilder Jr. is not an epidemiologist. Don't listen to my opinion about the vaccine. Don't listen to his opinion about the vaccine. Listen to an expert. And if you're someone who chooses to disregard expert advice, you have the right to do that. I respect that right. But what is not a right is playing professional football. Playing professional football is a privilege. You have the right to get vaccinated and play, or you have the right to remain unvaccinated. I respect both choices. What I don't like is people who conflate the two and believe that, oh, I have the right to play professional football as someone who is unvaccinated. Because nobody has the right to play professional football. We are all given rights in this country, rights and freedoms. But last I checked, there's nothing in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms about playing in the Canadian Football League.
Indeed.
All right, we got to take a quick break, Dunkster. When we come back, we'll be talking about Duke Williams and Trey Roberson. Welcome back to the 3 Down Nation podcast. Dunkster, Duke Williams is expected to make his debut with the Saskatchewan Roughriders this week, while 2019 CFL All-Star Trey Roberson signed back with the Calgary Stampeders following a stint in the NFL. Which player will be more impactful down the stretch for their team this season?
Bro, Sergio Castillo is out here with his hand up saying, I want to be in this conversation, all right? The West is heating up, man. For me, though, this really comes down to, and I think Castillo can certainly have an impact, but that Bombers team is just so above and beyond good that it comes down to a question between Williams and Roberson. Williams will have a more tangible impact for the average fan, but I think in actuality, Roberson could have the bigger impact of the two. I say that due in part to the recent play of the Saskatchewan Roughriders offensive line because if Cody Fajardo is being harassed or flat on his back, it's hard to get the ball to Duke Williams. And also because I think what Roberson can do for this Stampeders defense is legitimately just play on an island, go and lock down one dude because he was that type of player before. And if he's fully healthy again, which it seems like he is, I think he can get back to that level in Calgary. So that changes the way that Brett Monson can attack opposing offenses. And with the way that Calgary has been playing of late, to think that they could get even better, especially on the defensive side, has got to be scary for opposing offenses.
Yeah, if Shaq Evans was out for the rest of the season, I would be picking Duke Williams here because it's clear that that offense, without Shaq in the lineup, has lacked that deep threat. They have lacked the deep ball. They have lacked someone who can take the top off of the defense. Kyron Moore, I think they thought would be that guy. He's done a great job of catching things underneath, but he hasn't really helped them stretch the field the way that Shaq Evans was able to do. So they're getting Shaq and they're getting Duke. I can't wait to watch those guys ball out. But I'm going to agree with you, Dunkster. Trey Roberson is the answer to me. I think he's really going to help the Stamps. And there are also some rumors about at least one impact player in that secondary not being vaccinated. Now, it's possible they'll be vaccinated by the postseason, but again, if that hypothetical comes true and it's Calgary at Winnipeg for the West Final, presuming Roberson is vaccinated, the Stamps, I'm sure, are going to be very happy to have an elite player in that secondary and potentially help fill and pick up some of the slack that was potentially left behind.
We don't know for sure, but it wouldn't make sense for the Stamps to bring in a player right this late in the regular season with only, the Stamps have 4 games left, if he wasn't going to be able to play in the playoffs. So my thought would be that Roberson is good to go in terms of his vaccination status. And we got to remember how good this guy was as a DB. He was changing games on his own. Bo Levi Mitchell used to rave about Roberson. He is the type of player that you could really only put with one other name in my mind in the last decade, probably in the CFL in terms of cover corners, and that guy would be Delvin Breaux. So we're talking about a generational or decade type player here that the Stamps are getting back in the lineup.
Agreed.
Andrew Harris missed the second half of Winnipeg's Week 11 victory over the Elks and did not practice on Tuesday. Will he play this week? And do the Bombers have any reason to even rush him back?
I'd be surprised if Trevor Harris, or pardon me, if Andrew Harris played this week. Mike O'Shea told the media yesterday they never rushed players back, but they did play Chris Streveler in the playoffs last year with what I believe was a broken foot. So there's some inconsistency there. That being said, with
different timing though, that's sudden death, my man.
Different timing. But my point is Andrew Harris and the Bombers are one win away, essentially, from clinching first place in the West Division. They've done the dirty work. They've won 7 games in a row. They have the tiebreaker over Saskatchewan. They essentially have the tiebreaker over BC, and they're 1-0 against Calgary, albeit with 1 game left the final week of the season. Odds are they're going to clinch first place in the West. If not this week, they'll clinch it when they come back from their bye. So with 3 games potentially serving essentially no purpose in the standings, to me, if you're the Bombers, let Brady Oliveira and Johnny Augustine eat. Let them do their thing. There's no reason to bring Andrew Harris back. If you want, let him wait for the West Final and just stew and be ready to roll. Because when Andrew Harris is at the top of his game, this season he's proven 34 is just a number. He has been dominant. When rested and healthy, you may as well let him wait as long as he needs, because there's no reason to rush him back.
And that's really the most interesting part of the Bombers right now is how are they going to approach this, right? It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they're going to lock up first place in the West. Like, I don't see that really changing unless something drastic happens out there. They just need one more win to do it. So how do they approach these last games in the regular season, right? Do they just rest all their veterans, let them really heal up? But then I hate the debate, and it's so cliche, like rest versus rust. I don't really necessarily believe in that, because when you're a pro, you are paid to play the game. So you better be ready. There's no being rusty. And the Bombers have shown that they weren't rusty coming into this season with their record at 8-1 through 9 games, the best team by far in the CFL in the regular season. So whatever they want to do with Harris is smart. I mean, there are some people out there, or maybe even Harris himself, would want to get to that 1,000-yard mark. That was something he talked about. Still within reach, but is it worth it at the expense of rushing him back through an injury instead of getting another Grey Cup? I think you'd rather have the CFL title.
Yeah, and if I was the Bombers, I'd be getting on the phone and talking to some people who were involved with those Alouettes teams of the early 2000s and say, hey, how do you play the last month of a regular season when it means nothing? Because those are the teams that for a decade span had locked everything up. And often it did not work out in their favor. They only had 2 cups over that long Anthony Calvillo-led stretch. So if I'm the Bombers, I want to know what they did, what I can do to copy them, and maybe what I can do to do the opposite.
No, I don't know what they wanted. I don't want to know what they did, because you said they only had 2 cups in that time. I get they were a great team, and the East is a different conference. I ain't calling up anybody on those Alouettes team. That was decades ago. I'm doing my thing, and Wade Miller, Kyle Walters, Mike O'Shea, Zach Collaros, Andrew, all these guys, they've shown that they know how to win a title, and I think they got a great shot to do it again.
Fair point. Dunkster, Dane Evans has been activated from the 6-game injured list in Hamilton. Can he help reignite the team's offensive attack?
I mean, he could in a sense. Like, he's 2-0 as the starter, but Jeremiah Masoli had his best game of 2021 by far the last time out. Over 300 yards, a couple of touchdowns, didn't turn the football over, looked more sharp. But the issue there is they got to finish drives. You know, whether it's been Masoli or Evans or even Watford in there at quarterback, they have not consistently been able to cap off their longer possessions, or even when they get down there inside the red zone or the money zone, whatever you want to call it, the green zone, they got to score touchdowns. That's really, to me, been the issue with this team is, yes, there's been some of these close losses, but in reality, those losses would have turned into wins quite easily if they finished some drives. So whether that's Evans or Masoli in there, I don't think it really matters. They just got to show that ability like they did in 2019 to finish. And they finished teams off, right? Like, they knocked them out of games early, going 15-3. And I think there is some of that ability to be dominant on this Ticats team. It's just that they haven't gotten the end zone. The defense is absolutely balled out. With Jeff Reinbold, you always know the special teams are going to be strong. But the offense got to start scoring touchdowns, or the Ticats, dare I say it, going to start being worried about even making the playoffs.
Well, they've lost 2 straight. In my opinion, both games they should have won. They certainly should have beat Montreal before Vernon Adams made that last-second throw to Eugene Lewis, slinging it for the touchdown. They lost a 1-point game on a 51-yard Boris Beatty field goal before their bye. So this team, as much as they're easy to go, well, they're 4-5, blah, 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 they're really close to having won 6 of their last 7 games, including their last 4. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should consider them to be 6-3 because, well, you're not 6-3 unless you're 6-3. But that being said, I do think they're better than their 4-5 record indicates. And you're absolutely correct. Jeremiah Masoli had his best game since returning from his ACL surgery that took place in August of 2019 this past week against Toronto. The team just has looked better, frankly, with Dane Evans under center, at least through the early part of the season. I don't think that Dane Evans is better than Jeremiah Masoli, but he did seem to bring something to that unit. And as you said, Dunkster, they got to do whatever they can to get in the end zone, finish drives, put teams away early instead of letting them languish and hold on and potentially complete comebacks late in games. Which
has happened recently in their last couple outings, right?
Both
the Montreal
times.
Alouettes stormed back. Yeah, exactly. And the Argos in the fourth quarter was ridiculous. And yes, you sort of have these events that happen that people think are unbelievable, but the other team is paid to make plays too. Like Tavares Daniels, 360 touchdown. Boris Bidet hitting it from 50-plus yards. Like those dudes are paid as well. So you got to knock them out when you can. Hodge, you reported that former TSN play-by-play man Rod Black was a victim of cutbacks at good old Bell Media. Tell us all about it.
Well, we all know that Rod Black and TSN parted ways. Officially it was mutual. But in doing some digging, I was able to confirm with Black's agent he was not offered a contract extension. His contract expired on August 31st, though he did agree to remain on and call some CFL games for about 6 weeks following the expiration of his contract. I know that Black would have loved to stay on. He was with Bell Media and CTV for 40 years, the last 30 with TSN specifically. Personally, and I did talk to Black as well on the telephone. Rod Black is a super popular person for a reason within the industry. He is a class act. He is a super nice guy. And though he did express, some disappointment, obviously, he did also express, gratitude, talked about how he loved being part of that team for so long, feels so grateful, so fortunate to have been a part of so many amazing sports moments and memories. And he's not retiring. He's got his production company. He's got other opportunities. He's going to keep continuing to share Canadian sports stories. So no, at the end of the day, I don't believe it was as mutual as it was officially made out to be. He's 59. Bell is looking to cut back where they can, like most companies coming out of this pandemic. It sucks that he was a victim of that, but I'm excited to see what we see next from Rod Black.
Certainly, and I mean, to be quite honest, as much as there was a lot of people that were tired of Rod Black's call and felt like he used so many cliches, and honestly, and I think Black would admit this, like basketball was clearly his favorite sport, so there were some people that felt like he maybe wasn't as into the football calls as he was of some of the other sports that he does, and some of that stuff. I think there is no doubting that he is an absolute pro, and you mentioned this as well, but I think it needs to be reiterated. A great guy behind the scenes, and I don't say that lightly, right? Like a lot of these people, players and coaches and scouts and GMs and media, like if you don't actually really know them, I don't really like saying that, but by all accounts, all the people that you talk to, our boy Dwayne Ford, the fellow CFL draft guru, absolutely raves about the guy, and if 40's raving about him, then Blackie was a great guy, and that was just their relationship. They got along so well, so I feel for him, and especially the way that it went down. It never really seems to end well with some of these bigger corporations in terms of the talent being let go, and there's always going to come a time where you get on in years and we all kind of get older and they want to move to younger, different people in the booth. But the timing of it, I just can't comprehend. Like, it's great that he agreed to do a few more games after, but why would he be gone, like literally in the middle of a season? Or, I mean, I guess it's like 2/3 over, but still, that part just doesn't make sense to me. Like, why would you not want to have a nice send-off for him on the air and do it in a professional way in terms of how Black approached all of his projects with the company? Now, it didn't seem like he necessarily wanted that, and he didn't tell his coworkers and the people around him that the game that indeed was his last game was actually that. But still, you would think if you're the network, you would want to do a guy properly that's been with you for over 30 years.
You would certainly think that, and you are correct. He did not want, the dog and pony show for his last broadcast. He was happy to keep that to himself, and I respect that. But it is strange to ask someone to stay on after their contract has expired, but not for the rest of the season. That is confusing to me just from a logistical standpoint. But anyways, if you're listening, Rod, we'll miss you. On that note, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, it'll be time for Hodge's Heritage Moment.
For 40 years, Michael Myers has haunted this town. He's the essence of evil, and evil dies tonight.
Halloween Kills, rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent. In theaters and streaming only on Peacock now.
On this day in 1951, Drake University's Johnny Bright was targeted by members of Oklahoma A&M, renamed Oklahoma State in 1957, who had bragged before the game about their intent to injure the black player. Defensive tackle Wilbank Smith knocked the star quarterback / halfback unconscious 3 times in the first quarter, eventually breaking his jaw and forcing him to leave the game. This came to be known as the Johnny Bright incident and provoked changes in NCAA rules that included the mandate of helmets with face masks. Bright later became the first black player ever selected by the Philadelphia Eagles as their first-round pick of the 1952 NFL Draft. Fearing discrimination, Bright chose to sign in Canada with the Calgary Stampeders instead of pursuing the NFL. He played 13 seasons with Calgary and Edmonton, recording 10,909 rushing yards and 67 touchdowns. He was named the league's most outstanding player in 1959 and was inducted into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame in 1970. Oklahoma State did not apologize for the Johnny Bright incident until September 28, 2005, 22 years after Bright's death. Dunkster, we're talking 70 years ago, one of the most unfortunate yet iconic moments in college football history. It reminds you how far we've come and how far we have yet to go.
Well said, buddy. And if you got a far trip to go on the road, you know where you got to hit up first? Jiffy Lube. Get in and out in a jiffy. 15 minutes or less are going to have you back on the road, ready to rock and roll, and your car or your vehicle will just be purring along. These dudes are meticulous about making sure your wheels are ready to go, and they'll also get you in and out quick so you can get to your destination and make sure that you know that you're going to get there because your car ain't breaking down.
Yeah, especially where I live in Manitoba, we got harsh winters. It's important to winterize your vehicle. I know that I'll be doing what I can soon to get my ride ready for the winter, and I trust the good folks at Jiffy Lube to make that happen. Dunkster, it's now time for the 3-minute drill, powered by Jiffy Lube. Canadian kicker Liram Hajrullahu worked out for the Washington football team. Do you think he'll get signed by an NFL team this season?
Dude, I think he should be signed. That is different than if he actually gets signed. It just needs to be the right opportunity and timing. I feel like if he can get in, kind of like Sergio Castillo got that opportunity, that Hajrullahu could set himself up to be in the league for a couple of years. Elks star running back James Wilder Jr. confirmed on Twitter that he remains unvaccinated against COVID-19. Is that a big deal, Hutch?
It's not, because Edmonton's not making the playoffs. The Red Blacks signed quarterback Tom Flacco, who was in training camp with the Riders and is also the younger brother of former Super Bowl MVP Joe Flacco. Is that a big deal?
It could be. I mean, he hasn't been there as long as, let's say, Devlin Duck Hodges, but really Caleb Evans looks legit. It shows me that this personnel department in Ottawa continues to work and try to bring in talent for Paul LaPolice to work with. The Blue Bombers Of course, traded for kicker Sergio Castillo, who opted out of his contract with the BC Lions. He's expected to join the team after their Week 12 bye. Can he solve all of those kicking woes in the Manitoba Capital?
Well, he actually had a better percentage in 2019 than Justin Medlock, and he actually has a better career field goal percentage in the CFL than Justin Medlock. So I'd say, hey, if you're better than arguably the greatest of all time, yeah, you should solve those kicking woes. The Stampeders are holding a contest to celebrate Bo Levi Mitchell becoming the team's all-time completions leader and deemed Rod Peterson ineligible to win. Is that a low blow?
No, man, I love the entertainment, man. Hype it up. Jacob Ruby issued an apology for misrepresenting his vaccination status to the Edmonton Elks, which triggered his release from the team in August. Should the Canadian offensive lineman be forgiven?
I'll say this, I believe in second chances, but this incident took place 6-7 weeks ago. So the apology, it's better late than never, but, you know, after 6-7 weeks of silence, I don't know. I think this could have been done a little sooner. Canadian running back Chuba Hubbard scored his first career NFL touchdown with the Carolina Panthers, the first of many.
Yes, of course, my man. Christian McCaffrey, God love him, an absolute superstar, is on injured reserve until I believe it is Week 9. That means Hubbard's going to continue to get opportunities, and Matt Rule, his head coach, loves him because Hubbard tore him up at Baylor while Chuba was at Oklahoma State. The BC Lions released running back Shaq Cooper, a prized offseason free agent signing. Is that a surprise?
Well, it would be a surprise if BC ever ran the ball, but the Lions evidently don't have any interest in running the ball, so yeah, frankly, I'm surprised they kept any running backs. At this point, you may as well get rid of them all. Dunkster, we always love doing this show on Wednesdays. We thank our listeners for joining us. We'll see you next time.
For 40 years, Michael Myers has haunted this town. He is the essence of evil, and evil dies tonight.
Halloween Kills, rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent. In theaters and streaming only on Peacock now.